That it's important, especially when you cover as much boxing as I do, to understand the landscape, to understand the path of each recognized title, the IBF, WBO, WBA World, Super World, and the WBC. So today we're going to talk about James Chunky DeGALE. What is he? 19-1 with 13 KOs, only loss, majority decision, if I'm correct. And I'm talking about the decision, majority decision, or split decision to George St. Groves. George St. Groves now should maybe, in some eyes, have 3 losses on his record, but he almost had a 4th loss when he fought a guy by the name of Christopher Abras. Anyway, George Groves is the WBC Silver Super Middleweight Champion, 168 pounds. That makes him the #1 contender for Anthony the Dog Durrell's WBC title that he got from Sakio Bika. So follow me. T Street Controversy Live, subscribe. I'm not done yet. So you have James DeGALE, who for about 3 or 4 fights was the #1 contender for the WBC 168-pound title. He fought, Brandon Gonzalez. He fought Brandon Gonzalez to be the #1 contender for the IBF title when he was looking very sharp. I'm talking about in May on undercard of Froch versus Groves too. He looked good. You know, I'm talking about as, how can I say? In my opinion, he opened my eyes and like, oh, okay, he got some skills. He's grown. So now he's the IBF #1 contender. You got Cobra Froch. He's got the WBA World and the IBF title. But since you have to completely eliminate Andre Ward from your thinking right now, he's not boxing. He's been taken off. He's being slowly taken off of people's pound for pound rankings and rankings for the division in general. So scratch him off. So Carl Froch is the recognized 168-pound champion right now. He's got the IBA, WBA World, and then you got Anthony the Dog Durrell, who's got the WBC, 2 fights with Sakio Bika. But guess what? Sakio Bika fought a guy by the name of Antonio Periban. Antonio Periban is 22-1 with 13 KOs. But here's the interesting thing about that. He lost, well, it was a draw between him, Badou Jack of the Money Team. He had a very tough fight with J'Leon Love where he put some work on J'Leon Love and he could have maybe even won the fight. He fought Sakio Bika and was almost the WBC champion. And what some say is the fight of the year. What undercard? It was on the undercard of Broner versus Malinaji. So Antonio Periban is not just some Mexican guy. He's 30 years old, and looking at his record, especially his last 3 fights in which he could have won. Remember, his last 3 fights have resulted in 2 defeats, 1 to J'Leon Love, and we know where J'Leon Love is now, and then to Sakio Bika for a world championship. So you mix in Badou Jack in there, you know, that draw, and you think, well, wait a minute. That's about, you know, that's more credible competition than James DeGale's career. And you also have to factor in, remember, this is this guy's chance now to become the #1 contender for Froch's IBF. So he already went for the WBC and lost. And I'm talking about Periban. So now you got to think, look at him as a person, like, you know, even if you haven't heard of him or haven't seen him fight before, if I'm telling you that he fought for another title and lost in what could have been maybe the fight of the year, or I definitely know it was the round of the year, round 12, that last round where they were just throwing bombs. It was on the undercard of Broner versus Malinaji. Long story short, he fell short then. You know, he basically, you know, had that draw. Okay, here's what happened with the Badou Jack fight. He threw more punches, and in my opinion, the harder punches. Okay, he threw something like, I'm going to round it off, about 800 punches. Badou Jack threw about 500 punches, but landed at something like 40%. He landed at something like 200 plus punches. So you got Periban, who's thrown like 800 punches, right? And only landed with about 150. It was almost similar to the Mayweather versus McDonough first fight. I'm not saying it was on that same level and magnitude. I'm just saying as far as, okay, it depends on what the judge was looking for. So Now you got this guy who's fighting George. I mean, now you got this guy who's fighting a guy who's the #1 contender, and I don't know if he's comfortable yet, or I don't know if he understands the role, you know, or the path that's right now out there for him, and it's very tough. So, for example, if he doesn't get Carl Froch vacates, okay? Let's say he does get Carl Froch. That opens up a fight with Anthony Dirrell. And listen to this. Andre Dirrell is going to be taking on some guy in December, and it's going to be the #1 contender after DeGALE for the IBF title. So if Froch vacates and DeGALE fights somebody else, I don't care who, I'm just saying, and he fights somebody else, then he's got Andre Dirrell already set up. You know, so the 168-pound division is very tough. You're going to find out who these fighters are. And that's why you got guys like George Groves, who's the WBC silver champion, once again, taking fights against Dennis Duggan. No knock against Dennis Duggan, but he know with that Christopher Rabras performance, he definitely ain't ready to get slumped again by Anthony Dirrell. He's got some endurance and stamina issues he's got to pick up on. But see, getting back to DeGALE, when it comes to this fight, if he beats a guy like Periban, you have to understand, he's beating a guy who fought for a championship and a guy who fought basically for his life for that championship. And he's had 2 somewhat disputed bouts. So therefore, if you look at the fact that he lost a close bout, you know, against Sakio Bika, and look at his last 2 bouts against J'Leon Love, you know, where J'Leon Love did not look good at all. And then look, he even knocked him down. And then even look at the Badou Jack fight. You think like, well, wait a minute. This guy's along the lines of maybe, you know, the way Diego Chavez was. You know, remember, he's fighting Timothy Bradley, but he had that tough fight with Keith Thurman where he lost, and then, you know, Brandon Rios. So when he was winning the fight, but he got disqualified for DDTing. Long story short, I can sit here and talk all day because that's what I do. I'm T Street Controversy. This is T Street Controversy, and I love and I cover boxing. So this weekend, November the 22nd, 2014, I'm going to be covering Bellew versus Cleverly versus Bellew to Scott Quigg versus somebody, and Carl Frampton's better than him to me. Anthony Joshua versus Michael Sprott. James DeGALE, Marco Antonio Periban, Dennis Duggan, George Groves, Dennis Duggan, Pacquiao, Algieri, Lomachenko, Panyoy, something like that. And then Zoshimin versus, I don't know. And then Jesse Vargas versus Antonio DeMarco. And maybe one more, because that's what I do. Turn it up. So please subscribe. All my videos, boxing articles, everything right down below. Real Combat Media. The #1 source right now for boxing. You know why? It's because I'm not even going to start bragging. T Street Controversy, T Street Controversy Live.